Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm doing this for the ranking member. She didn't have time to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letters opposing the EPA's Waters of the U.S. final rule, supporting efforts to reverse the rule under the Congressional Review Act. These letters are from the National Federation of Independent Businesses, the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, representing our state officials most knowledgeable on the concerns of farmers, the Associated Builders and Contractors, and a coalition letter from more than 40 organizations opposing the rule, from organizations including American Farm Bureau, Association of Home Builders, National Association of Manufacturers, U.S. Chamber. So I ask unanimous consent for that.
Without objection.
And I also ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a coalition letter from many of these same stakeholder groups explaining specifically why the current WOTUS rule is significantly worse for farmers, ranchers, energy producers, manufacturers, construction workers than the pre-2015 guidance that would take effect if there was a CRA resolution of disapproval passed and signed. So,
Without objection.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So, Mr. Administrator, two final quick questions for you on topics you and I have talked a lot about. One is, in December, you and I had what I thought was a constructive discussion regarding the EPA's use of its 404C authorities. Particularly, we talked about particular mining projects in Alaska, and you committed to me that any use of those authorities would not be precedent-setting. When the EPA finalized its recent 404C action on the already denied Pebble mine, I appreciated your statement at the press event where you said, by no means is this meant to send any signal as a precedent beyond this specific project. And last week, Assistant Administrator Fox committed to me essentially the same thing that you had, both in our meeting in December and what you said publicly. Since you're here in front of the EPW committee, this is a bit pro forma, but you've already committed to me on this. But for the record, will you make the same commitment about this not being precedent-setting that you have in our conversations and then in your press statement?
Absolutely. It's definitely case by case, not meant to send any signals. This is a tool that we use very sparingly, I think only 3 times in 30 years. So I think the record for that speaks for itself, and I think the Administrator Fox and I are 100% aligned on that.
Great, thank you. Let me turn to the issue that I know environmental justice, racial equity are important to you. I want to raise a environmental injustice in Alaska issue against the Alaska Native people that, unfortunately, some people in this administration consistently overlook. This is another one, though, that you and I have talked about where I believe you, in your administration, have been helpful. We have over 1,000 sites that are contaminated land sites that are owned by the Alaska Native people after the passage of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. That was 44 million acres of land and the largest land settlement in the history probably of the world for Native people. And yet, in many cases, that land that the federal government provided to the Native people was contaminated. Now, I'm not saying the feds knew it was contaminated, but it's very contaminated, a lot of that land. And initially, believe it or not, it was unclear whether the EPA and the federal government was going to come after these Native organizations and tribes for liability to clean up land that the feds had given to them that was contaminated. Fortunately, in this committee, and I thank the chairman, we worked together in a bipartisan way to say, hey, that would be nuts to hold them liable since they were the ones given the land that was already polluted. But what we need to start working on now is helping these indigenous people in my state clean up the lands. So would you agree that this is an environmental injustice that we got to work on to get them lands in an important landmark agreement, but a lot of the lands were very polluted and they can't use them?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree that we need to work diligently together to clean up these lands.
Good.
That are
Thank you.
disproportionately impacting.
And I will say the EPA, under your leadership, has been helping us on this, so I appreciate that. It's going to take money, of course, to clean up. But the one thing I would like to just get a commitment from you on is working with us on some innovative approaches. You and I have talked about the mitigation banks for wetlands and things like that, where you might be able to get credit for cleaning up if someone, as opposed to putting land in a mitigation bank, was able to help clean up these lands. Same kind of overall goal to help the Native people clean up their contaminated lands that were provided to them by the federal government. Would you commit to me again, Mr. Administrator, to help on not just the funding, which you guys have been doing a good job on, I commend you on that, but on some innovative ideas that we've talked about. The Trump administration had some really good ones, and I'd like to follow up on that with you.
Yeah, our folks are laser focused on innovation along with these resources, so absolutely.
Good. And finally, let me just ask, can I get your commitment then in working with us on these issues to ensure that tribes and Alaska Native corporations, remember ANCs were created by Congress, a lot of people forget that they are eligible for the brownfield grants to clean up contaminated lands? Right now in Alaska, there's confusion on who qualifies for that. From our perspective, if you want to help the indigenous people, it's through tribal help. It's also through ANC help. There shouldn't be any real differences. As a matter of fact, the ANCs are the ones that own the vast majority of the land. So not including them on brownfield grants just kind of defeats the purpose. Can I get your commitment on that?
We've got a $20 million grant program specifically for ANCSA for last year and this year in the budget request.
Great. So ANCs and tribes.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We've been joined. Thanks,